I was standing outside the door of our apartment on a Friday evening in late October, grocery bags in both hands, when I heard her voice through the door, clear as anything. "He's going to propose tonight. Watch how I turn him down and make him cry." Then laughter. Her laughter. The kind I used to love. I didn't move. Couldn't. My hands went cold around the bags. My chest did something I don't have a word for. Not quite pain, not quite shock. Somewhere between the two where everything just stops. I had the ring in the inside pocket of my jacket. I'd been carrying it all week because I couldn't stop reaching in to touch the box, just to remind myself it was real. For years, I had given this woman 4 years of my life, and I was standing outside our door in Portland, Oregon, listening to her plan my humiliation. Her name was Sophie. Sophie Caldwell. 28 years old, dark hair, a laugh that used to fill up every room. She worked in human resources at a mid-sized firm downtown. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, a rooftop thing in the Pearl District. Summer of the year I turned 26. She spilled her drink on my shirt. I told her it was fine. She laughed. I was gone from that moment. For years. I paid for half the rent on the apartment, half the utilities, and most of the groceries because she was still building her savings. I asked her father's permission 8 months ago. Richard Caldwell, retired engineer, a decent man, who shook my hand and pulled me into a hug and said, "Welcome to the family, son." I saved for 9 months to afford the ring. 1 carat white gold, her initials and mine engraved on the inside band. The jeweler in the Pearl District told me. It was the most thoughtful commission she'd had all year. I believed her. I stood at that door for what felt like a long time. The bags were getting heavy. Finally, I turned the handle and walked in like nothing had happened. Sophie was on the couch with her phone up, FaceTiming. When she heard the door, she glanced over and said, "Babe, you're early," and ended the call fast. Not fast enough for me to miss her friend Amber's face on the screen. Amber Holt, her college roommate, the one she talked to every day. I set the groceries on the kitchen counter. I started putting things away. Sophie came in and leaned against the refrigerator and told me about her day. I nodded. I said the right things. I put the pasta in the cabinet and the milk in the fridge. And I kept my face completely still, because something had shifted in me the moment I heard those words, and I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I said a single thing out loud. That night I didn't eat dinner. Sophie made chicken and I moved it around my plate and claimed I wasn't hungry. I didn't sleep either. I lay in the dark staring at the ceiling, replaying her voice in a loop. "He's going to propose tonight. Watch how I turn him down and make him cry." Every time I reached the word cry, something tightened in my chest and I had to breathe through it. Saturday was one of the hardest days I've had in my adult life. Not because anything dramatic happened, because nothing did. Sophie made coffee in the morning and asked if I wanted to walk down to the farmer's market. And I said sure. We walked through the stalls buying bread and cheese, and she held my hand and I let her. She squeezed my fingers 3 times. Our signal, the one we invented in the 2nd month of our relationship. The one that meant I love you. I squeezed back because I didn't know what else to do with my body. That night I sat at my desk and stared at the ring box I'd left on the nightstand, and thought about the morning I bought it. How I had stood in that jewelry store and felt something close to joy that I hadn't felt since I was a kid. How I had texted my best friend Marcus Webb, who I'd known since our freshman year at Oregon State, and typed only, "I found it," and he had called me back in 30 seconds, laughing. I didn't sleep Saturday night either. 2 hours, maybe 3. The plan had been to propose Sunday at her parents' house in Lake Oswego, during family dinner. Her parents held Sunday dinners every 2 weeks. Her father always made a fire in the backyard. Her mother, Carol, always cooked something enormous and delicious. Sophie's younger sister Madison would be there. 23, sweet, always kind to me. Her parents' golden retriever, Chester, would spend the whole evening nudging my hand looking for scraps. I'd been to 40 of these dinners. I knew where the good wine was kept and which bathroom to use, and exactly which chair Richard Caldwell sat in at the head of the table. I had told Richard 2 weeks ago that I was going to propose. He had looked at me with something I can only describe as pure, uncomplicated pride and said, "She's lucky to have you, Daniel. My name is Daniel Mercer. I work in marketing for a regional firm. Good salary, good benefits, normal life. Not a banker, not a CEO, just a person who had believed, genuinely believed, that he had built something real." Sunday morning I woke up feeling nothing. That's the only honest way to describe it. Not sad, not angry, numb in a way that felt like standing in cold water up to your chest. Sophie got dressed next to me, humming something under her breath, and I watched her from the edge of the bed and thought, "Who are you?" The drive to Lake Oswego took 45 minutes. Sophie talked the whole way. She talked about a problem with a coworker. She talked about wanting to repaint the bathroom, maybe a dark green. What did I think? She talked about a new recipe her mother had been trying, some kind of braised short rib thing. She sounded completely, entirely normal. I gripped the steering wheel hard enough that my knuckles turned white. I kept asking myself a question I couldn't answer. How do you spend 4 years with a person? 4 years of Sunday mornings and inside jokes and airport pickups at midnight, and then sit in a car talking about bathroom colors, while you wait for your chance to make them cry. When we pulled into the driveway, she put her hand on mine. "You've seemed stressed lately. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said. Dinner was exactly what it always was. The table set perfectly. Carol's cooking filling the house with warmth. Richard talking about his Saturday golf game. Madison showing us photos of the new puppy she was thinking about adopting, a little brown terrier mix, for months old. Sophie laughed at something Madison said about the puppy's ears. I looked at Sophie laughing, and felt like I was watching a stranger through a window. "Right, babe?" Sophie said, touching my arm. I hadn't heard the question. I nodded. "See, Mom? I told you he'd agree." Carol smiled at me across the table. Richard looked at me from the head of the table, with that same expression from 2 weeks ago, the one with pride in it. I had the ring in the left pocket of my pants. Felt like a stone. When dinner ended and Richard asked if I'd help him take out the trash, our signal, the moment we'd planned, I followed him out to the side of the house. The night air was cold and clear. Portland, October. The kind of night I usually loved. "Something's wrong," Richard said. Not a question. "Yes, sir." "With Sophie. I can't tell you everything tonight. I need more time. But yes, something I need to investigate first." He was quiet for a moment. "How serious?" "Serious." He put a hand on my shoulder. "I trust you, Daniel. Whatever you're working through, handle it right. That's all I ask." We went back inside. 20 minutes later, I told Sophie I had an early call the next morning. International client, time zones, and we needed to head home. She looked surprised. She looked at her mother, then her father, then me. Something moved behind her eyes that I couldn't quite read. Disappointment, maybe, or something else. In the car, she was quiet for 10 minutes before she spoke. "What was that?" "What was what?" "You barely said a word all night. You told my dad you needed to talk to him about something." "What's going on, Daniel?" "Work stress." "It's not work stress. I know the difference."
I'm tired, Sophie.
"Are you mad at me?" I turned and looked at her at a red light. "Are you happy?" I asked. "In this relationship. Are you happy?" "Of course I'm happy. Why would you even ask that?" The light turned green. I kept driving. Sophie picked up her phone and started typing. Probably to Amber. Probably telling her the proposal hadn't happened and something was wrong. That was fine. Let her wonder. That night, after Sophie went to bed, I sat at the desk in the living room with my laptop and went to work. First I checked our joint bank account, the one we'd set up 18 months ago for shared household expenses. I found 3 cash withdrawals I didn't recognize. $500 6 weeks ago, $300 a month before that, $700 the month before that. all made by Sophie. I opened a spreadsheet and documented every transaction I could find. Then I opened her public Instagram. She had a secondary account I hadn't known existed. The captions were strange. My investment banker. I'm in marketing. Dinner sponsored by my man. A photo of a restaurant I'd taken her to for her birthday. 12-course tasting menu, $260 for the two of us. Living the life I deserve. The comments from her friends were worse. Get it while it lasts. That ring is going to be massive. He pays for everything? Teach me. I took screenshots of everything and saved them to a password-protected folder. Then I called Kevin Park. We'd been friends since college. Stayed close after he moved into tech consulting. I kept it simple. I needed to know if it was possible to recover deleted messages from a phone I had physical access to. He asked a few questions. I answered them. Bring it by tomorrow at lunch, he said. I sat in the dark for a while after that. It was past midnight. Sophie's breathing was even and slow behind the bedroom door. I thought about the version of my life I had been 24 hours ago. The man with the ring in his jacket who thought he knew exactly what his future looked like. And I felt the distance between that man and myself, like a physical gap in the floor. I opened a new document and started making a list. Every step I needed to take in order, without panic, without drama. I have always been that kind of person. Methodical. My mother used to say I was obsessive about planning. I prefer the word disciplined. Monday I got to the office before 8. By 9 I had responses from 2 of the 3 family attorneys I'd emailed Sunday night. I scheduled consultations for Tuesday and Wednesday. At 10 I went to Kevin's apartment with Sophie's phone in my jacket pocket. I'd taken it that morning while she was in the shower. I had it back in her charger within 30 minutes. Kevin did everything through a recovery program he ran on his laptop. An hour and 20 minutes later, he handed me a printed folder. I stood in his kitchen and read it. The messages went back 3.5 months. Sophie to Amber, mid-September. This guy from the industry mixer keeps texting me. His name is Ethan Cross. He runs a tech startup in San Francisco. He's literally everything Daniel isn't. Amber's response. What does Daniel not have? Sophie. Ambition. Drive. That energy. Daniel is sweet, but he's just comfortable. A week later, Ethan asked me to dinner. I said yes. Don't tell anyone. A month after that, he offered me a position at his company. Director level. Triple my salary. But it's in San Francisco. Amber, are you going to take it? Sophie, I want to, but I need to handle Daniel first. Handle Daniel. I kept reading. 2 weeks before last Friday. Marcus asked Eric about the ring last week and Eric told me. Daniel is going to propose at my parents' dinner on Sunday. Amber, what are you going to do? Sophie, say no. He needs to understand that I'm not just going to do whatever he decides. Whenever he decides it, I want to see how he handles it. If he falls apart, that confirms everything I already know. If he's strong about it, maybe I reconsider. Amber, Sophie, that's kind of cruel. Sophie, it's necessary. I've been comfortable for too long. I put the papers down on Kevin's kitchen counter. I looked at the wall for a moment. You okay? Kevin asked. Yeah. Can I have an envelope for this? I went to the bank that afternoon. Opened a new account in my name only. Transferred $22,000. My money I could document with pay stubs going back 3 years. Then I went to look at apartments. 2 bedrooms. Good building. 12 minutes from my office in Northwest Portland. Available November 1st. 800 square feet of nothing that had anything to do with Sophie Caldwell. I signed the lease that afternoon and paid the deposit. And first month's rent without hesitating for a second. That evening I called Marcus. I met him at a bar near his apartment and showed him everything, the recording I'd made of Sophie's conversation Friday evening. I'd set my phone to record in my jacket pocket. The moment I heard the first few words through the door, some reflex I'm still not entirely sure I planned, The messages, the account records, the photos. Marcus sat with all of it for a long time without saying anything. "Brother," he finally said, "I know. What do you need from me? I'm going to do this clean. I need someone who knows the plan. In case anything goes sideways. You've got me. Every step. I didn't propose. I didn't explode. I went home that night and sat next to Sophie on the couch. And we watched television. And I was as calm and ordinary as I had ever been in my life, which was, in a strange way, the hardest thing I had ever done. Because some part of me, some animal part that had loved this woman for 4 years, wanted to put the ring box on the coffee table right then and ask her to explain it. Wanted the scene. Wanted the confrontation. Wanted her to account for every word in those messages. But I had learned something in those 48 hours. Sophie wanted drama. She wanted me off balance, reactive, desperate. That was the whole architecture of the plan. Say no, watch me beg, decide whether I was worth keeping. Based on how I fell apart. She wanted to be the one holding all the power in the moment. And the only way to deny her that was to never give her the scene she was waiting for. To exit quietly. To take back the narrative entirely. I spent the week preparing. I met with both attorneys. The first, Patricia Stone, who'd been practicing family law in Portland for 20 years, told me the situation was clean. The apartment was in my name. The joint account had clear paper trails. My case was solid if it came to that. I filed the paperwork for a formal vacate notice. 30 days, legally compliant, hand-delivered. I also found things I hadn't been looking for. Ethan Cross had a public LinkedIn. CEO of a startup called Meridian AI, headquartered in San Francisco. He was photographed at a Portland tech conference 9 weeks ago. The same weekend Sophie told me she had a girls' night with her work friends and came home at midnight. His Instagram showed a dinner photo from 6 weeks ago. Sophie was in the photo. Her arm was touching his. She was smiling the way she used to smile at me. I documented everything and added it to the folder. On Thursday evening, I told Sophie I needed to go to Chicago for the weekend. Work trip, client presentation, flying out Friday, back Sunday night. She asked if she could come. I said it was all meetings. She kissed me and said she'd miss me. I said I'd call her every night. I didn't go to Chicago. I went to Marcus's house in Northeast Portland and spent 48 hours going through every step of the plan until it was airtight. Sunday night, when I texted Sophie that I was heading back from the airport, she replied with a row of heart emojis. I read them and felt nothing except a quiet, absolute certainty. Saturday morning, I called Richard Caldwell at 7:30. He picked up on the second ring. I asked if I could meet him privately. He said, of course, name the place. I chose a coffee shop on Burnside, halfway between his house and mine. He was there when I arrived, 5 minutes early, wearing his Saturday jacket, looking like a father who already knew. The conversation was not going to be good. I handed him the folder. He read for a long time. The coffee shop filled up around us and emptied again. And he sat there turning pages. When he finished, he set it down on the table and looked at me with an expression I won't forget for the rest of my life. He looked like a man who had just found out something had been broken in his house, that he had no idea was broken. I didn't know she was capable of this, he said. I didn't either. The man in San Francisco, Ethan Cross, he offered her a director position. She was planning to leave Portland. This, I nodded at the folder, was apparently how she was planning to leave me. Richard was quiet for a long time. What do you need? Nothing, sir. I have a new apartment. My finances are separated. I'm going to deliver the notice today. The vacate notice. The apartment is in my name. She has 30 days. That's the right call. He said it like it cost him something to say it. It's the right call, Daniel. What she did is not something I can justify or explain.
I'm sorry.
Don't apologize for her. That's not your job. He took a copy of the folder when I offered it. He tucked it into his jacket, and we shook hands in the parking lot. and he held on a moment longer than necessary, the way people do when they don't have more words. I drove home. Sophie was in the kitchen when I walked in, still in her pajamas, pouring coffee. She turned around and her face lit up. "You're back early." I was never in Chicago. A beat, just a small one. But I saw it. I put the folder on the kitchen table. She picked it up slowly. She read it standing at the counter, her coffee going cold. I watched her read it. I watched the color shift in her face, the small visible collapse that happens when someone realizes the story they've been telling has been read by the wrong person. "You went through my phone." I recovered deleted messages, yes. That's illegal. You can take that up with an attorney. I've already spoken to two. She set the folder down. She looked at me. "Daniel, these are out of context. Tell me the context for handle Daniel first." She didn't answer. "Tell me the context for planning to reject me in front of your family, to see how I'd fall apart." Her voice got smaller. I was confused. I was scared. I didn't know how to. "You weren't confused. You were strategic. There's a difference." I reached into the folder and pulled out the vacate notice and set it on the table. She stared at it. "Daniel, the apartment is in my name. 30 days. Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know. That's not something I'm responsible for working out." She started to cry. Real tears. I think I've replayed the moment enough times and I believe they were real. Some part of her had genuinely expected to be the one holding all the cards in whatever scene we were going to have, and instead she was standing in our kitchen, holding a legal notice and a folder full of her own words. I felt something looking at her. Not satisfaction, not cruelty, just a kind of hollow sadness for everything that had already been lost. Before either of us said a word, she reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Don't," I said. "I love you. I know that's not enough right now, but I do. I genuinely love you. You don't treat someone you love the way you treated me. You don't strategize them. You don't use them as a backup option while you audition replacements." I picked up my jacket from the chair. "I'm going to Marcus's for a few hours. When I come back, I'd like the conversation to be done." "Daniel, please." "Sophie." I stopped at the door. "For what it's worth, I hope you figure out what you actually want. I hope it makes you happy. But it's not going to be me." I closed the door behind me. In the elevator, I pressed my back against the wall and breathed. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, from the release of something I had been carrying for 9 days straight, something that had taken up every corner of my chest. And now it was done. The door opened into the lobby, and I walked out into the gray October Portland morning, and got into my car, and drove to Marcus's. He opened the door before I reached the front step. "Done. Done." He handed me a coffee. We watched football for 4 hours. We didn't talk about it much. That was exactly what I needed. A week later, I moved into the new apartment. Marcus and his brother helped carry boxes. We ordered pizza and ate it on the floor, because the furniture hadn't arrived yet. The place smelled like fresh paint and possibility, which sounds like something a self-help book would say, but that's honestly how it smelled. My apartment, my walls, my rules. 6 weeks after that, I was at a departmental meeting at work, when my company brought in an outside consultant, a process efficiency specialist named Rachel Torres. She was 31, wore a gray suit, had a calm and precise way of speaking that I noticed immediately. After the meeting, she asked if I had 15 minutes for an intake interview. We ended up talking for 2 hours. I didn't tell her about Sophie that day or the day after, but by the end of her second week she knew most of it, because she asked direct questions and I gave direct answers, which she told me was unusual. Most people in that situation either can't stop talking about it, or can't talk about it at all. You just tell it like it happened. I told her I'd had a lot of time to process it. She said that wasn't really the thing she meant. Rachel left to start a project in Seattle 3 weeks later. 2 days before she left, she asked if she could give me her personal number in case I wanted to talk. I said yes. We texted for 3 weeks before I asked her to dinner. We went to a small Italian place in the Pearl District. She told me about her own history, a relationship she'd ended 2 years ago, with someone who had made her feel like she was always auditioning for a role that kept changing its requirements. I told her about Sophie. She listened the way some people listen, where you can tell they're actually processing it, and not just waiting for their turn. "You're not angry," she said. "Not really. Not anymore. That's rare." "I had a good plan," I said. "The plan helped." She laughed. It was a real laugh. Nothing performed about it. We went slow. I want to be clear about that because it matters. We went genuinely, deliberately slow. Dinner once a week for a month, then twice. Then we started spending weekend mornings together. Then she helped me hang shelves in the new apartment, and we ordered takeout sitting on the kitchen counter. And I thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Not constant management of someone else's emotional weather. Not walking on a tightrope every time you say an honest thing. Just two people who decided to be present with each other, without a hidden agenda on either side. She never asked me to pay for everything. She never performed emotions for her friend's benefit. She never made me feel like a rung on a ladder she was climbing. When something bothered her, she said so directly without building a strategy around it. When I said something clumsy or wrong, she told me, and then it was done.
No escorequeping.
No theater. 6 months after the day I walked out of our apartment on Couch Street, Madison Caldwell sent me a text message. We had stayed loosely in touch. Her parents had sent a card. I hadn't opened it for 2 weeks. When I finally did, Carol had written, "You deserved better, and I believe you'll find it." Richard had signed his name under hers and written nothing else, which I appreciated. Madison's text that afternoon said, "I thought you'd want to know." Ethan turned her down. Dad sent him the messages. Turns out he didn't want anything to do with someone who manipulates their partner. She's moving to San Francisco anyway. Got a position at a different company, much smaller. She's going alone. I read it twice. I showed it to Marcus that evening, and he said something about karma. I said I hadn't been thinking in those terms. And I hadn't. I hadn't spent a single morning since October, hoping Sophie's life would fall apart. I'd spent my mornings on other things, better things, things that had my name on them. That night, I was at Rachel's apartment. She'd taken a local project, had been living in Portland 3 months by then, and I told her what Madison had said. She listened, and then she said something I've thought about a lot since. "The thing about choosing someone for the wrong reasons," she said, "is that it catches up with you. Not because the universe is keeping score, just because it's exhausting to perform a life instead of living one." Is that what she was doing? Isn't it? She wasn't building anything. She was managing appearances, managing options, managing you. That's not a relationship. That's a project. I thought about that. About the captions on the Instagram account I'd found. "Living the life I deserve." About the messages. "Handle Daniel first." About standing at the door in October with 2 bags of groceries. And my whole future in my jacket pocket. And hearing the woman I planned to marry laugh about making me cry. "What she did to you was unkind," Rachel said. "But the part that saved you was you. The planning. The patience. The fact that you didn't blow it up in front of her parents. Or call her out in the car. Or any of the other things you could have done. I wanted to. I know. But you didn't." That's the part one keep coming back to. Not Sophie. Not Ethan Cross. Not the ring I eventually sold at a jewelry exchange on Alberta Street. I got back about 65% of what I paid. Enough to cover a long weekend in Bend, Oregon with Rachel in January. Our first real trip together. Skiing and board games at a rented cabin. And the kind of unforced conversations that feel like they could go on for decades without running dry. I keep coming back to that moment at the door. The moment I heard her words and decided to be quiet. decided to be methodical, decided that whatever I was going to do next, I was going to do it from a place of clarity instead of pain. That choice didn't save my relationship with Sophie. It ended it, which was the point. But it saved something else. It saved me from becoming a smaller version of myself in that moment. From being the man who fell apart in the way she had predicted. From handing her the scene she had scripted. I never responded to the message Sophie sent me 6 weeks after everything ended. A long one, from a number I didn't recognize. She'd gotten a new phone by then. She said she was sorry. She said she understood now what she'd had and what she'd thrown away. She said she hoped I was well. She said she'd heard I was seeing someone and that she was glad. I read it. I thought about it for maybe 5 minutes. Then I blocked the number. Not out of bitterness. Just because that chapter was genuinely, completely closed. And there was no version of a response that served either of us. A year after October, I was in my apartment. My apartment, fully mine. Everything in it chosen by me and Rachel together. Over months of ordinary weekday evenings. And Madison texted me a photo. Her new terrier puppy. The brown one from the photos at Sunday dinner. She'd finally gotten him. She named him Chester, after her parents' old golden retriever who had passed away in the spring. She said her parents had asked about me. She said her mom still made pot roast on Sundays, and had asked once or twice if I'd ever want to come by. I wrote back that I appreciated it, that I'd think about it, that the puppy was perfect. I put my phone down and looked across the room at Rachel, who was sitting cross-legged on the couch going through something on her laptop, completely absorbed, not performing anything for anyone, just existing in the same space as me, plainly and honestly and without an agenda. I thought, this is what I almost traded for a ring I'd spent 9 months saving for. I thought about the grocery bags, and the door, and the sound of her laugh. And then I thought about how sometimes the thing you think is the worst moment of your life turns out to be the moment that sent you in the direction you actually needed to go. Not because of fate or karma or any of those things people say, when they're trying to make suffering feel meaningful. Just because it was a clear enough signal, if you were willing to listen to it, that something wasn't right. And I listened, and I acted on what I heard. And every single day since then, I have woken up in a life that is genuinely, quietly mine. That's the whole story. I used to think the best revenge would have been some dramatic confrontation, something that would have left her with no response, no escape, no way to reframe what she'd done. But standing in a jewelry exchange on a gray November morning, sliding that ring across the counter to a woman who gave me a fair price for it, I understood that I didn't want revenge. I wanted back the time, the money, the 4 years of myself I'd given to someone who'd been budgeting me like an expense. And you can't get that back through any kind of confrontation. You can only make something better with what comes next. So that's what I did.